fossil fuels are only for shows. Please keep them in the ground, no new coal, oil or gas projects.
Hi, so just to the host, Pelenise is waiting to be admitted in to our technical team. Okay. Sorry about that. We had some technical issues as well with the song. So we are hoping that we'll play the song again at the end. But good evening, good morning. I know it's good morning in the Pacific, and it's evening here in Glasgow. And it's a pleasure to be your host for this morning's webinar, where we will be discussing the Pacific Islands traditional knowledge solutions to the climate emergency. So I'd like to welcome all our panelists who are all on the call this morning. Representing Tuvalu Climate Action Network, we have Richard from Vanuatu Climate Action Network, and also a rep for Santo Sunset Environmental Network. We have Allan Taman. From the Solomon Islands Climate Action Network, we have Shabella. From Kiribati Climate Action Network, we have Pelenise. And from Pacific Islands Climate Action Network, we have Belyndar. It's a pleasure to have you all on this webinar in this space, and we'd like to also acknowledge GIZ and ADB and others for allowing us to have this space to share some of the solutions to the climate emergency that are being led by our Climate Action Network nodes and their members on the ground. And we also would like to acknowledge the support from the Climate Justice Relief Fund, Resilience Fund, PIEFs, and EU NSA support for the Pacific Islands Climate Action Network. Now that I believe the session is recorded, and now so we're going to move into this discussion. We're going to hear from 5 incredible grassroots leaders who are well connected in their work with frontline communities, and who will share some of the insights and share some of the best practices of how communities are dealing with the climate emergency, and some of the solutions that are informed by their own traditions and cultures, and knowledge, and also wisdom, to mitigate climate change, but also to adapt to some of the climate impacts. And so we have a set of questions that we've posed to these community leaders. And first, I'd like to introduce Shabella. And Shabella works with the Solomon Islands Climate Action Network. And I know she also works for Oxfam in Solomon Islands. So Shabella, what are some of the climate change impacts that are happening in your community in Solomon Islands, and what is your community or what is your organization doing to address some of these impacts, showcasing some of the traditional solutions and actions? Vinaka. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Shabella, for some reason. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, okay. So again, yes, I am from the Solomon Islands, representing the Solomon Islands Climate Action Network. So just to give us a brief background about Solomon Islands. So the Solomon Islands is situated in Southwest Pacific Ocean, approximately 2,000 kilometers northeast of Australia. It's a scattered archipelago of about 1,000 mountainous islands and low-lying coral reefs. So today, as population increases and development also increase, the burning of fossil fuels and coal in the atmosphere, as we all know, has caused sea level rise. It's impacting everyone in the Pacific. And the low-lying atolls and coastal communities are mostly affected here in the Solomons. So for atoll islands in the country, it has created issues in terms of their water systems. They have been contaminated with salt water, creating a problem for them to access fresh water for cooking and drinking. The increased salinity disturbs the soil, and one of the important crop is the swamp taro, which requires certain salinity to grow and produce tubers. But with the current change, it can no longer be sustained, and even other crops such as breadfruit and banana. It's also impacting the health of communities, especially amongst grassroots and rural communities living on lower islands, as people start to depend on imported goods such as rice, flour, noodles, sugar, and tea. And in the context of us, these communities are very isolated and it needs to be supplied by boats. And so oftentimes boats would miss their monthly schedule, and the people of atolls will have to ration or staff to ration whatever they can to survive, resorting to coconut and dry fish for months or more, causing malnutrition for children in the islands. For the very rural people, this has become a struggle, as they are subsistence farmers living off the land. But given the situation, they have to sell what little they produce in order to pay rice, or they depend on their children working in urban areas of Honiara to supply them with food. So it puts strains on these communities. And soon they will be forced out to higher grounds or relocate to different locations. Their cultural identity and dignity, their human rights to land, food, and water will be taken away from them. And furthermore, the climate has changed drastically in weather patterns, with less rainfall over time, causing rivers to dry. Rainfall causes intense flooding, and cyclone seasons have become more frequent and intensive that are catastrophic to losing human lives and properties. For women and young girls, they have to spend extra hours walking to reach their gardens and spending more time nurturing their crops to ensure that they have enough for their families and to sell at the market, or working long hours to get fresh water. And for people with disabilities, already they are facing many challenges because of the different disability impairments. And this would further add to their existing challenges of accessing basic food, water, medical support, education, and other infrastructures as well. And so what the community organizations are doing to address this, in the Solomon Islands, due to our deep connections with land and sea over time, we tend to hold a wealth of traditional knowledge and how well to manage these ecosystems. Today, with the current impacts of climate change and in the heat of COVID-19 pandemic, shows that not only are we the most affected, but we are more resilient and not inherently vulnerable. This is because we can demonstrate strong adaptation skills when it comes to harsh environmental changes over time through food preservation, biodiversity conservation, and traditional knowledge in the use of our ecosystems. For example, for the people of Tuvalu on the eastern side of Solomon Islands, food preservation has become efficient to sustaining their livelihoods during climate emergencies. By drying of breadfruit into a dry starch, food having a biscuit-like crispness, which they call nambo. And it has become their main staple food. And also, not only is it edible or it's also very popular amongst other Solomon Islanders as well. On the outer islands of Tuvalu, there are volcanic islands of Tikopia and Anuta. They're very isolated from the rest of the world, and they have become resilient, especially to climate seasons. The designs of houses is very unique by building it so low to the ground that if you want to go into the house, you have to crawl. But it's made specifically from local materials from the forests. And another traditional ecological knowledge, which in my local dialect we call it tatabu, also it's meaning taboo. So this has been derived based on superstition beliefs towards respecting or honoring certain animals, plants, or sites that symbolizes the genealogy origins. So the systems and practice revolves around ensuring humans are benefiting from nature in a sustainable manner. And over time, it has been enforced to limit harvesting in certain areas or specific food for medicinal purposes. And the practice has blended well with the current biodiversity conservation of ecosystems as nature-based solutions to climate change. And so to conclude with the work of the Solomon Islands Climate Action Network, we try to support and raise the voices of these marginalized women, men, youths, and people living with disabilities and climate change issues and actions. This is through advocacy, building capacity, empowering them to promote and influence climate change issues through partnership, information sharing, networking with government and other stakeholders and communities at all levels, and to ensure that an inclusive approach is taken in building resilience in the Solomon Islands. So Lami, I think I'll stop from here. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Shabella, for sharing the work of Solomon Islands Climate Action Network. You began off with some of the impacts of the climate crisis and how that is disproportionately impacting some of the vulnerable groups, including women, young people, people with disabilities. And then you went on to share some of the good and the best practices on the food, processing food and keeping foods for prolonged periods of time. But you also shared a very excellent insight about how they're designing houses specific in the Solomon Islands to I guess allow people to live in a way that they're able to adapt to the changing climate. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to move on to our next speaker, and this is Richard Gokurun. He is from the Tuvalu's Climate Action Network. He's the director of Tuvalu Climate Action Network, and he's been, heavily involved in, community mobilizing and advocacy and policy work and policy influencing work in Tuvalu. So, Richard, welcome to the, this webinar session. What can you tell us about, the climate impacts in your community there in Tuvalu, and what are some of the kind of actions that your community or your organization is doing to address this, drawing from, some of the traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom?
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, and Alofa to you all who are present at this time. It's a good morning from us here in Tuvalu, and I think it's late night also in other parts where you are in. And thank you also, Shabella, for your nice presentation on that. I can see that most of the impacts are very interconnected with us here in the Pacific. And so, just to provide a few background on the Tuvalu location itself. But Tuvalu, we all know that it's a Polynesian island nation, which is located here in the Pacific Ocean, just a midway between Hawaii and Australia. Tuvalu consists of 9 island atolls, with 3 reef islands and 6 atoll islands, with populations approximately close to 12,000, and we have a land area of 26 kilometers square. Tuvalu is known in the world as the 4th smallest nation of atoll islands, and we are truly exposed to the unprecedented threats of climate that has been affecting most of the frontliners here in the Pacific. Well, I can share some of the impacts with the communities that normally associated with climate change, where sea level as the first of the impact that has a lot of disturbs on our daily lives in Tuvalu. Sea level rise have intruded our waterlands, where the ground water are no longer safe for drinking. We have lost drinking groundwater as it's been contaminated with the intrusion of salt water, and this thus has also affected the infertility of the soil for cultivations or for planting. We cannot plant or revive our local root crops like pulako or giant taro, and also the normal taro that the Tuvaluans depended on as their root crops daily supplies. Also, the sea level rise has also affected the low-lying areas, which causes residents to displace from those inundated area to further inland or to other parts, where this has caused internal displacement, and also some has chosen as this impact as to permanently leave the country. There's also associations of coastal erosions, and come to an extreme where when it coincides with sea level rise at the highest peak of king tide, this has created a lot, together with storm surge, the more erosions, and also causes some of the islets on the islands to disappear and permanently no longer be inhabited again. The increasing temperature also increases the sea surface temperature that intensifies the tropical cyclones here in the regions where we the vulnerables that we feel the extreme of the cyclones, as we have no other shelter areas to take shelter of when we have this extreme intensified cyclone passing around the seas, our area, moving to further south of the region. And also increasing in acidification and coral bleaching. This has given also the inconvenience of temperature rising experience here in the locals, with uncomforting nights of than normal, and also the days are hotter than usual. This has caused people to start moving from places to where they can get more windy areas, or to moving away from their homes during at nights just to find a bit cooler places where they can also use it as for a temporary, just to release, just to ease the inconvenience of the heat during that time. Also, there's changes in rainfall pattern that also been affected on the country itself, which we know this has been changes through the impacts of climate change. Yes, and though these impacts are a daily basis or daily on monthly basis that we normally face that here in Tuvalu. The Tuvalu itself, how we combat, how we address these climate issues, showcasing or using our traditional knowledge and actions. Well, Tuvalu have its cultural traditional knowledge and practices, which we can avoid, and we can try to adapt to these impacts of climate change. Tuvalu has this traditional knowledge where they understand the weather forecasting through their natural science by looking at the wind patterns, the fish movements and birds movements, other signs which can give them a hint of what to expect in the coming few days or few months. And so with that, they also have the traditional building methods where they can adapt to the environmental hazards. These building houses which are built using local materials to adapt with the impact of sea level rise. These traditional houses has been mounted on a high stone foundations to prevent flooding and storm surges. It has a dome ceiling, combat humidity, and has open sides to allow ways to pass through, the airs to the wind to pass through, so that we can find it more comforting staying in our hearts. So such traditional dwelling, this incorporates the architectural styles that enable them to withstand the extreme weather and also the extreme strong winds that we face during cyclone season. In terms of our security-wise, them on how our traditional knowledge are used to stabilize on our food security. We have the traditional farming system in Tuvalu where we have a number of mechanisms that allows for sustainable production of our supplies for agricultural products. These traditional knowledge of farming methods, the farmers, they know the certain type of plants to grow at certain times of a moon, example, a new moon or full moon during that, and also a time and seasons of months that they know that it is suitable for farming. And that particular time when they do that farming, it really produces a good outcome, a good fruitage of the cultivation that they do, that we can get much supplies of food in order to have a stock ready in case of any disasters that might disturb the life of the root crops, and also other farming that has been put on that at that time. In terms of fishing, as Tuvaluans are mostly depending on their daily subsistence getting from the oceans, they have a particular fishing method that they need in a particular season. In every year, they understand the time of a particular seasons of fishes, the time where they can get this particular fish, and catching of birds at that time, and the seasons of other resources that we can utilize and use them as food. And with all the catchments and with all those adaptive methods that they use in using the traditional knowledge and their custom way of living, they have also utilized the production into preserving it in a way that it can last it for months, and at times it can last it up to a year. For example, extracting fresh coconut juice like the toddy from the coconut trees, something that they can use it in placement of sugar. They can drink it as fresh. They can also cook that toddy to become a toddy syrup that we can preserve for a long period of time. Salted fish, for example, also. when fishermen do a lot of catchment, they also salted the fish, they smoke the fish. These are preservation ideas which they can keep these fish for a longer period of time. And in time with this bad weather, these fish can also be brought out to be used again. Same applies to the salted birds that the people are using as part of their reserves for the food security. And so these adaptive measures that the traditional knowledge that has been using, also including with the breadfruit that other elders normally use, which they grated the breadfruit and sun it and use it as a breadfruit starch. That is also something that's adding up to secure the food security for that longer period of time. And so these knowledge that we are also trying to advocate and also give these practices to the new generation so that they easily adapt to it during this crisis of war scenarios of climate change, so that they know how to live and survive using the local resources that we have in order that they can combat and they can withstand this impact of climate change. In addition to that, we also have organization of disabilities here. So as we are vulnerable already, and these are the most vulnerable people, we always put in mind that we also prioritize that everyone is inclusive and also no one is left behind. So those are the practices, measures of adaptations that the local communities are using in terms of combating the climate impacts that we are facing in Tuvalu. Langi, I think I'll stop in here, or I might take a lot of time discussing on this.
Thank you so much, Richard. You've shared extensively not only on the impacts of the climate crisis on atoll island nations, but also how that's disrupting livelihoods and groundwater access for the people there in Tuvalu. But you've also shared some of the the good best practices on how people in Tuvalu are using traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom to counteract some of the impacts that they're facing, whether it has to do with food security or whether it has to do with creating more intergenerational spaces where young people are being taught some of these life skills and are being taught how to be resilient. So and some of the things that you have shared, I think is quite similar to what I would identify are being practiced here in Fiji. So these are very I think things that are quite similar to other Pacific Island countries. And now we move on to our next speaker, and who's also from a small not small but rather atoll island nations, and so we have Miss Pelenise from the Kiribati Climate Action Network, and she's no stranger to the climate movement here in the Pacific. She's attended COP, and she's been heavily engaged in community mobilizing and advocacy and policy and political action work. So Pele, if you can provide us with some of the experience of climate crisis, of the impact of the climate crisis in Kiribati, as well as what are some of the things that communities are doing to address this issue, drawing from this rich traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom.
Larry, and good morning, everyone. Larry from Kiribati. Thank you, Tuvalu, and the others that have presented earlier. I am sorry, I just came in online, tried to connect, but I'm here now, and so happy to share with you what we're doing here with the Kiribati Climate Action Network and our partners in Kiribati. Of course, we do have problems in Kiribati, very similar to Tuvalu. The solutions are we do not look at the problem and run away from the problem. We look at the problem and we face it. And the best example for Kiribati is Kiribati KiriCAN building and owning its own resilient village. If you come to Kiribati today, we have a resilient village where our office is based, and this place was inundated, and every high tide water comes in. It was a hotel. It was a hotel with many rooms, and people have left it, or the owners have left the place because they couldn't live on it because of the water. So they left. And when the water was high, we came in and asked if we could use the place. So we are here right now. Why do we come here? Remember our slogan that says, our slogan, we are not drowning, we are fighting. So when the water comes in, we came in. We need to stop this water. The good news is that we've stopped the water. Very little water comes in now, and we change it into a habitable place, a place where people can come in and learn. A learning experience from a place that was inundated, a place that people have left behind. No one wants to touch it. They're not making money from it. We've moved in. So what have we been doing? We brought in the food security projects, the health projects, the WASP projects, ecosystems, and we're just renovating the whole place. We have a greenhouse, we have a compost house, we have a farm, and we're developing the land so that people, when they come in, we have a story. And our story is, you don't run from your problem. You face it and be strong and tell everybody and tell the world that we can survive wherever we are. As long as we get the support, two things, we have that. We need a technology, we need funding to survive. We already have our traditional knowledge, we have them, but we need more. We need more that for us to move on. So that is what we're doing right now in Kiribati. We have a team that is doing the health, people that come onto campus to the health program. The health program, when we have a youth that are running the health program, and on nutrition, the right food to eat, the right drink to eat, and your lifestyle to change. Because you know, many of our people will die, not from climate change today, but from our lifestyle, the way we look after ourselves. And when the impact of climate change is here on us, we will not be able to mobilize ourselves. We're too weak. So we need to be healthy. First of all, we need to be healthy. We need a place that we need to grow good food. We need to strengthen our to protect our coast. And so those are the things that we're doing. We have a youth and we have a youth group that is doing ecosystems and marine, teaching them coral planting, seaweed planting, mangrove planting, and just mapping, ecosystem mapping. And they're working as volunteers. And when they get equipped with this knowledge, then we can, teach more youth to do it, to be engaged in it. So, and with the wash, water, health, water and sanitation and hygiene, that's what we're doing. Because that's also a problem. And the health and the food security. We're going out to outer islands with the COVID that is here. One of the main things that we've done is teaching the people how to grow their own food, using the new technology and traditional technology. Well, with planting of food, our people, like what Tuvalu has been sharing, we have our own traditional knowledge of growing our own crops. When you talk, Tarawa does not have food security because this is an urban area. When I said urban, that means there is, people are here to look for jobs, education, and all that, and there is no space for them to really grow traditional crops. So we have to depend on the outer island people to grow traditional crops and to bring them to the mainland so that it can replace rice and flour and sugar. So we're targeting the outer islands with growing traditional crops that can provide food for the mainland. For the mainland, we said, we have a new technology of growing food, and that is, we use what we call, in Tuvalu, they also use it, food cubes. Food cubes. And this is, we're keeping all this for the urban areas because we have no land. And so to use these cubes to plant their vegetables, you cannot really plant traditional crops in them. That's how we feel. So keep them in the urban areas. So plant their vegetables. Their taro and their cassava will come from the outer islands or the pumpkins. So they can have a good diet or balanced diet while they're living here in the urban area, they're healthy. And so we talked about our islands, and we said we are vulnerable. We know our problems. I think we also know how to solve it. But the solutions is with us. How to take the problems is really with us. How do you, for example, one of the projects that was given to us to go and for the COVID project is to go to North Tarawa and to go to communities and teaching them how to plant and growing their food because of the COVID. But instead of doing it, we change it and we say, we're going to tackle or focus on the agriculture assistant, the person that looks after agriculture in North Tarawa. What did we provide in North Tarawa? We provide everything that this man needs. We built his nursery with a greenhouse, compost house, the seeds, planting materials, we fenced it, and we told him, now, when you go to the communities, you have something to take to communities. Before that, no one has done it. And so we realized that just going to communities and teaching them is not enough. We need to strengthen the person that is going to work with communities. When we leave the project, if we leave North Tarawa, somebody's to carry out our work for us and to go to communities. And so we realized that we need to be flexible and really see the need in those islands, in the islands, where in communities. Do we need to go to community, or we need to change it? And you have to, a balance check to see what is the best thing for communities and how to help them. And so today, the outer islands are sending food to us to sell, sending their vegetables and sending their pumpkins for us to sell here on the mainland. Why? Because the agriculture assistant is able to distribute seeds and planting materials to his farmers. Why? Because you help him first instead of going direct to the community. So those are some of the things that we've done in Kiribati. There's so much that we can share, but it really, when we talk about problems, I want to say, let's not look at it as a problem. Look at it as an opportunity for you to be strong and be resilient. And for your people, never look at a problem as a negative thing. Look at it as an opportunity. And so I think I should stop here. And if there are questions after, we can be sharing. Yeah, because if I talk about traditional knowledge, there's so much, but traditional knowledge and a close knowledge. And one of the projects that we're doing right now is collecting data and collecting information on traditional knowledge, but we're not giving it out to anybody. we make sure that those who own the knowledge have the IP. You know, they have given they give us the mandate to share it, but it's under their name. That's what we're doing right now. So we're collecting information, and so that we can share it to other people. Otherwise, nobody will share traditional knowledge to us. We have close knowledge. Most of the close knowledge are very, very strong and can really help us when we deal with climate change problems. It can help us. We have the modern knowledge, we have traditional knowledge, but traditional knowledge is only maybe 30% or 20% we have, because most of it is closed knowledge. So we are working on this to be able to collect and to share, but under the guidance of the Ministry of the right and the proper ministries like commerce, to make sure that it's registered under the name of the people who own it. And we need to do it fast, otherwise, climate change is took over, and we are late in sharing this knowledge. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Pele. You've really shared comprehensively and on some of the good and the best practices that's happening in Kiribati. And I love the optimism and also the resilience of the people in Kiribati, despite the many multiple and compounding experiences from the climate crisis, as well as from COVID-19, that they're still pushing on with some of these good practices to combat, to address, and also to adapt to some of the climate impacts. And you touched on a really good point around the messenger. When you're working with communities, it's important that the messenger is well trained, has that kind of capacity to showcase that these ideas has worked. We've used traditional knowledge in a way to build resilience around food security, so that people are able to adopt those best practices and implement them. So without taking any more time, I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is from Vanuatu. And so we have Allan, who is also with the Santo Sunset Environmental Network, and they've done a lot of work around environment conservation, around the empowerment of women, especially in resource management, in managing the resources, and also training around climate change and human rights, gender and inclusion. So Allan, we'd really love to hear from you on some of your work, and also the impact that climate change has on your communities, and how communities, specifically grassroots communities that you work with, are dealing with these.
Okay, thank you, Langi. Good morning, everyone. Good evening to the delegates of the UN Climate Conference COP 26. I bring you warm greetings from the people of Vanuatu. Anapik Rantalel Meomto, which means hello in my indigenous language. The Republic of Vanuatu is a small country in the South Pacific Islands. Our population is 300,000, and most of us live in small villages on 80 different islands. Where I am now on Santo Island, in a very remote part of the country. We have no roads, no wharf, no electricity grid, no pipe water supply, and mobile networks coverage doesn't reach our people. I am speaking to you now from the village of Wunpuku, at the only secondary school in the area, and using a new satellite internet connection. The people here fish and farm taro for their livelihood. Houses are built with bamboo and thatch roof. Here we depend on nature for every part of our lives. As chairman of Santo Sunset Environment Network, it is my job to help my people live sustainably so that we do not damage our resource and so that we have everything we need for food, water, shelter, and safe communities. But now our dreams are becoming impossible. Climate change is something Vanuatu did not cause. Climate change is destroying our environment and killing my people. Last year was suffered a direct hit from Category 5 Cyclone Harold. It was one of the strongest storms ever to hit the Pacific Islands. Here in my area of Santo Island, 90% of our houses were fully destroyed or partly damaged. Our food gardens were flattened, our water system were washed away, and forests and coral reefs were smashed. Just in our corner of the island, experts calculate that the loss and damage include the ecosystem was over 39 million US dollars. How can we, small island villages, afford to recover that? But it is not just cyclone. Climate change is bringing droughts, ocean acidification, sea level rise, and extreme flooding. We are facing the worst impacts of climate change here in Vanuatu, while countries continue to pollute our planet. They don't care about our loss and damage in Vanuatu, our own future, our future. They just want money. We are angry. We demand justice, climate justice. We demand compensation for the loss and damage they are causing. Today, a year later, we still haven't received government support. We have been left in to pay for our own recovery. The cost of climate change is heavy on our own shoulders. We are only able to survive today because of our strong cultural identities and our traditional knowledge. For example, a few days before the cyclone, our elders could read the color of the clouds, have used early warning to start to prepare food and store water. We use bamboo tubes to heat and store enough food to keep us alive. Our ancestors also taught us how to prepare curtains before a storm hits. Cutting off leaves and leaving roots and tempers safely protected in the ground. After the storm left us homeless, our women immediately started weaving new roofs with a coconut frond that had been ripe from the trees. It was lucky our traditional knowledge and construction is intact. PICAN, the government only provide us with 2 tarpaulin for each house 6 months after the cyclone. The rivers in our area overflowed and become filled with swell. and so we couldn't drink the water. But we have traditional knowledge about Gorkrun spring in the forest, which always have clean and safe water, even when rivers and streams are contaminated. Everything in our home was damaged and shocked through, but we were able to store important things in the caves our ancestors used. And our women are expert weavers, and we've able to weave back mats and bags to replace those that were destroyed. Our farmers know that within 24 hours of a storm, we have to plant fast growing greens, vegetables, so that within weeks we had to regular supply of food again. If we wait for the outside world for food aid, we would have strived. So I think our ancestors and confirm that through traditional knowledge, we have been able to survive the climate emergency so far. My organization, the Santo Sunset Environment Network, is now documenting as much traditional knowledge on fishing, agriculture, construction, medicine, and water protection as we can to help us before the next climate hazard hits. It takes money to do this work, but the billions of dollars we keep hearing about for climate change isn't reach my village. I don't know how long we will be able to depend on traditional knowledge to save us if the world doesn't stop polluting our skies, our land, our ocean. I am afraid that my people will face a future that we cannot survive. I call for world leaders to stop causing us harm. We do not want your aid or speeches. We want you to stop burning fossil fuels right now and stop putting our children, our environment, and our very life at risk. Thank you, Langi.
Thank you so much, Allan. And I guess, the audience as well as I have really learned a lot from what you've just shared in terms of the resilience of people in Santo Island. You shared right at the beginning that you do not enjoy some of the luxuries that we've taken for granted, electricity and water pipe systems and others, but your community has been able to live sustainably and manage the resources, but also have used traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom over the years as experience cyclone to be able to bounce back really quick on your 2 feet and ensure that there's food security, ensure that you are having access to clean water from the springs, and it's also a very positive to note that you're documenting this traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom, because it's very, very useful, especially for future generations, younger generations, to learn these skills. And as you rightly pointed out, when government aid is taking time to reach the communities are already responding to the natural disaster, the event itself, to be able to quickly recover and build back their livelihoods. Thank you so much, Allan, for sharing those valuable insights. And now I move on to our final speaker for this I was going to say evening, but it's morning for this morning. And it's no other than my good colleague and friend from the Pacific Island Climate Action Network. And she is Belyndar. Belyndar is a law student who's studying in Vanuatu, but is also one of the Pacific Island Climate Action Network's engagement officer. So Belyndar, could you share with us this morning, what are some of the Pacific Island Climate Action Network's position and advocacy for COP26, and what does this mean for local Pacific frontline communities?
Thank you, Lagi. Thank you for the introduction. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our speakers that have already spoken earlier about their very interesting traditional knowledge that it is very important for us, as younger generations of now should really take note of and learn about as we are facing this climate crisis. So basically today, this morning, I will talk about the PICAN's position and advocacy towards COP26. And so in the lead up to COP26, PICAN has been working across the region with a lot of partners, NGOs, CSOs to try and get the concrete positions that we Pacific should have for our world leaders in the lead up to COP26. Because we have seen through all the presentations that have passed that climate change has really affected the Pacific in so many ways and have affected the Pacific.
I think we're having a bit of a technical glitch there. Probably Belyndar will rejoin us. But to our wonderful audience joining in, if you have any questions for any of our panelists or speakers who've spoken before, please pop them into the chat and I'll be happy to ask those questions to our panelists. But for now, back to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Please go ahead. Belyndar, are you there? I can hear. Belyndar, can you hear me? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Langi, are you guys there?
I can, yeah.
I think I'm having internet connection.
Okay, so Belyndar, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Okay, so we've lost her. She's probably going to rejoin us back. So if there are any questions from the floor, from our audience, please feel free to raise your hands or pop your questions into the chat, and you can direct that to any of the panelists for this morning. Do we have any questions? And I'm going to probably ask our technical team to assist me if there's anyone who's going to ask question. Okay, Belyndar, I think she is back. So Belyndar, can you, yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, Laggy, I think I was having internet connections earlier because it cuts off. But yeah, I'm just gonna turn off my video and use the audio. Yeah, to share about the PICAN specific demands that we had come up with for COP26. One of the first, so from all the consultations that we have come up with top 7 demands that we see is very important for the Pacific for COP26. And one of the first demand was in relation to fossil fuels. And the thing that we see that is that fossil fuels, there should be an immediate need to end all fossil fuel subsidies around the world. And we are calling out on countries such as Australia, China, US, that are actually being at the forefront of funding these fossil fuels to actually step up and with their climate plans, not to have it for 2050, but have it for 2030. So that was one of the top line demands that we have for fossil fuels. And another one, and the second was to show real commitment. We are urging the world leaders, countries like Australia, again, as I've mentioned, to actually show their NDCs that they have to limit their global heating to 1.5 degrees, as the survival of the Blue Pacific is really at grave stake. It's really at the risk, and we are running out of times for us here in the Pacific. Therefore, there is an urgent need to cut all emissions down to 1.5 for the Pacific. And another thing is that to mobilize this promised 100 billion the 100 billion climate finance plan that has been promised, because for the Pacific, climate crisis is something that we deal with every day. It's something that we have seen it, we have experienced the first-hand effects of it. So we need them to show us the money, for them to show us the real commitment to fund all this loss and damage that we are suffering here in the Pacific. Not just here in the Pacific, but also those countries that are in the global south as well. And for loss, and the fourth one is for loss and damage. For us here in the Pacific, loss and damage is irreversible. Yeah, we have seen that it's a matter of life and death. And the thing that we are urging our leaders now is to act by using their political will to do policies or implement policies that are to support the Pacific people in terms of loss and damage. And that's one thing that we PICAN have really pushed forward towards this COP26, is to see that there is loss and damage acknowledged in the negotiations that is currently taking place in Glasgow. And another thing is the deeper injustice that we have seen, the inequalities that comes about when in this climate crisis. We have seen that the vulnerable people are really facing and have a place in the Pacific. The people of the Pacific should have a space that they actually sit there and talk about, not just to talk about the climate crisis stories, but to actually involve in the negotiations as well. And we have seen that this year's COP26, there is no inclusivity of equal participation of Pacific delegates at COP26. And that is something that we PICAN have really strongly advocated for, is to have an equal participation at COP26. And the last one is to make sure that there is the global climate negotiations at COP26 has to be inclusive, intersectional, and intergenerational. And by that we're saying that there should be strong voices of Pacific Islands people, that there should not be marginalized. The voices of Pacific has to be out there. It has to show the true leadership that Pacific we want in terms of negotiations, dialogues at COP26. So these are the top seven top line messages that we have collaborated with other partners around the Pacific and across the world in terms of our advocacy for COP26. So yeah, that is that. Thank you, Langi.
Thank you so much, Belyndar, and thank you for sharing those, Pacific climate demands, those key top line messages. You also brought up, the topic on, loss and damage. It's actually Adaptation and Loss and Damage Day today. So, and this is a topic, or rather, something that the Pacific has been pushing for into, the negotiation space, not only to, have loss and damage adopted as a separate agenda item, but also the operationalization of the Santiago network on loss and damage, the push to have, a separate finance mechanism for loss and damage. So yeah, there's a lot of, again, traction on loss and damage, and it's good that, to see that even here at COP26 that, there've been a lot of momentum and visibility on loss and damage that are, and I think, many of the vulnerable countries and Pacific small island developing states are really pushing hard on, loss and damage. So now we're going to move on to the question and answer session. And I already see questions are popping up into the chat box, as well as some useful links and to, resources and information. So the first question that I have is from Carol, who's writing from the Marshall Islands. And the question is, since most likely that, the 3 atoll nations in the Pacific will disappear, given the current trajectory, have any of the high island nations in the Pacific considered assisting atoll people with relocation? And so perhaps I think the best person to ask and to pose these questions to is Pelenise and also Richard. I'm not sure if Richard is still on the call, who are from atoll island nations, to get their perspective on, any discussion or dialogue that's happening around, relocation. So yeah, over to you, Pelenise, and then maybe Richard can add on if he's, yeah. Okay, I think we've lost Pelenise as well. Are there anyone else from the panel who'd like to respond to that? Oh, Richard is on the call. Go ahead, Richard. Did you get the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I've heard a little bit of the question, and I'm not answering straight to the question, and perhaps you can re-ask again. What I get, did you ask that was there any assistance from bigger countries to assist the small island atolls? Is that the question? Yes. Okay, right. Yes, we've been having also overhearing the discussions, and also New Zealand, Australia, also Fiji was also giving a hand of help to Tuvalu to relocate, to move on to their country in terms of sea level rise that will affect us or will totally submerge or gone underwater. Yeah, but it's not easy for most of the citizens and the people. Though the help was given, we can relocate to their countries. And yes, the major concern was whether all the rights or our sovereign rights as what we are practicing here will be accepted if we are relocated again. So it's a very difficult decision to make with some of the citizens, as this offer comes from the high level, but we are not really sure whether that has given the rightful consent from the citizens of those countries to fully accept our people to make a shift into their country. So I will just answer it in a simple way, as that we might hold more of the time in discussing on that. But yes, they did offer, and there are some places. Also know that in Fiji, Tuvalu has already bought piece of a boundary in Fiji to where they can have this relocation. Also, if there's a need to relocate, and if there are those who are willing to relocate without any problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard, for providing that that response. So there are already conversations that are happening with some of the larger countries in the Oceania, the Pacific region, but it's a matter of dignity for the people in Tuvalu. It's about their sovereign rights. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think I'm having a technical glitch as well from here. Yeah, that was I guess the response, a very well response from Richard. Now we have another question, but unfortunately Pelenise is not here to respond to that question from Atina about IP rights for traditional knowledge and what kind of support is needed in order to undertake that work. Are there any other panel members who'd like to respond to that particular question?
Hello, Langi, can you hear me?
Oh, you are back. Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, I'm using my phone now. I have a problem with the laptop.
Yes. It seems like we're all having our technical glitches at the same time. So there's a question here for you, Pelenise. You mentioned that IP rights for traditional knowledge. What kind of support is needed in order to undertake that particular work?
For the support that we're giving our people is that we collect the data from them. We work together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and we work with them to collect the data. And when it's final, we give it to the Ministry of Commerce, who are processing the IP for traditional owners. I think that's all we have to do. We present it to them, and when that is available for our traditional traditional owners of the knowledge, then once they have the IP, no one has received any IP yet. And that's what government is trying to do. You know, the biggest fear we have is that once the traditional knowledge is documented and is out, people won't get anything much from it. And this is a closed knowledge for our people. It's closed because it makes them it's very specific. It makes them very strong. It's their identity. This belongs to the family for generations after generations. Once we document it, it will be gone overnight. Just from us, we will be blamed for it. So we want to protect it for them, that if anybody want to use it, anyone in the world want to come and do a research in Kiribati and use this, they have to pay for it. They have to help these people to, that's one. The other one is if we know that if traditional owners know that it's going to be documented, it's going to be registered under their name, then they'll be willing to give. Today, many people die without giving this knowledge out because of this. It's only for their families. And so, but we want it. It's not only for their families. We all want it to be resilient. So if we want it, we need to pay for it. And that's what we're doing at the moment. Almost every project that comes to Kiribati, it's not just us, every project, anyone that wants to take the traditional knowledge from the people is documented and it's kept, and it needs to go through a process where you get the IP for the people. So that's what I'm saying. We think we know everything, but traditional knowledge is really very strong, and it's there. It's different from the modern knowledge where it's all documented. You can get it overnight on the internet. Traditional knowledge, you can't get it, but it's very, very, very strong. And I think all the Pacific Islands know their own traditional knowledge is strong, but we do not know how to get it. And so this is, for us to be resilient, we have to be smart. We have to respect the people who own the knowledge and to help them. And the only way to help them is go through the IP process. Yeah, that's from here in Kiribati. Yeah.
Vinaka, thank you so much, Pelenise, for responding to that. And you know, I think this is one of a unique, I guess, thing that a new thing I've learned from this particular session about, you know, safeguarding traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom through this process of getting an IP. Very useful. So we have two more questions, and I know we're quickly approaching our the end of our webinar. And so I'll try to quickly respond to one of these. So the one from Francisca from Samoa. What small actions are these small island nations taking to fight against climate crisis? I know that many of the panel speakers have spoken and shared some of the kind of practices and good work that they're doing at the community level, at the national level to address climate change. So, and they've also, you know, and this work that they're doing, they're drawing from, you know, traditional knowledge systems, from indigenous wisdom. They're creating spaces for, you know, young people to connect with the elder generation, to learn some of this knowledge and the wisdom to be able to be resilient in the face of, you know, the climate crisis. So finally, you know, this is to any of the panelists, a question from Zoe, who recognizes that, you know, Global North donor organization can, you know, often provide funding in ways that reinforce Western worldviews and approaches, rather than fully supporting the leadership of Pacific Islander groups, which have the local expertise in the traditional knowledge and wisdom. So do any of you have any thoughts on the sort of support, the funding and partnerships that will best enable local Pacific Islander groups and networks to continue their work? And he thanks all the panelists for their reflection and insights today. Does anyone want to respond to that? Richard or Allan, who's also on the call, or Belyndar? Please feel free to, yeah. So, okay. So Allan, please go ahead. I see you've unmuted yourself.
Okay, thank you, Lang. Yes, Santo Sunset Environment Network needs money to link the network with the indigenous people to continue to document the traditional knowledge or traditional wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan. Anyone else? Belyndar, please go ahead.
Thank you, Langi. In response to Zoe's question of like, if any thoughts on sorts of support funding that best enable local, I think there is a lot of funding out there for climate crisis. I mean, not climate crisis, but climate change movement. We have many funders that are just there for us, just to see what we can do to mitigate and adapt to this climate crisis. And they are just willing to fund the work that we are doing. We just have to show them the concept of what we want to achieve and how we will achieve that. And of course, get to know the right networks. For example, PICAN, we have collaborations with other networks outside that we could also help to reach out, that could also support other networks within the region, within communities for fundings to amplify the work that they're doing. So I think out there we have a lot of fundings that are out there. We just have to show the work we can do and how we can amplify that work outside of the Pacific. And of course, we can get funding for that one. So that's my thoughts on that, Lani. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Belyndar. And with that, I'll wrap up this discussion. And so in one sentence, I know there's a lot of things that you probably would love to share and for the, for our panelists, but in one sentence, the question that I have, final question I have for all our speakers is, what is your message to COP26 and what gives you hope? So any of the speakers, please, who would like to take the lead on that, please, unmute and go ahead and speak. What is your message to COP26 and what gives you hope?
All right,
Can I start, Langi?
Of course.
Sure, go ahead.
This is from KiriCAN. The message for the COP26 is to make sure that this COP26 is the last COP. The next COP will be implementation. No more agreements. We're wasting our time. 26 years of negotiations. This is a matter of life and death for us. No more meetings. We need to implement.
Thank you so much, Pelenise, for that. And I certainly agree with you, and I'm sure the others as well. Next speaker would like to share their one sentence on the message for COP26 and what gives them hope. Belyndar, would you like to go next?
Sure, Langi. I would be happy to share on that. And I do agree with what Pelenise have just shared. I think it's enough of discussions, but we need more actions. And my to the world leaders at COP26 is that climate cannot be politicized anymore. It has to be. And there should be an inclusive, equal participation of everyone from the global south in the negotiations. And I urge leaders to act now, act faster, and act better, because we are really running out of time. So that is my message to the COP26 leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Belyndar. So maybe Shabella and then Allan.
Yeah, sure. I think my message is also similar as to what Belyndar and the other speaker were just saying. So we've heard a lot of promises and pledges made by those world lead countries, and I guess it's time, to take those pledges, make them into actions, and so that we Pacific Island countries, we don't have 10 years to, to wait for an pledge to be for the promise to make come true, and so just we need immediate actions now. And I guess as Belinda said, we are running out of time. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shabella. And finally, Allan. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my message is stop fossil fuels for us here in Vanuatu, COP26, that we are ready to work. Yes, we are ready for work together. Thank you.
Allan. I see Richard.
Yeah.
You're here?
Yes, Langi, I think most of the message has been covered all with what other panelists have said. Most of the messages that I was wanting to say, it's already been said earlier, but we all have one heart. We all have to raise our voices as a Pacific. We need their action now. We need practical action that they should promise on, but not with their promising words that never been put into action. So yes, everything has been said with the others. I totally agree with it. And please, they must take action now. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to close off this session, and I'd like to thank our incredible speakers and panelists from our, Climate Action Network national nodes in Vanuatu, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Solomon Islands, and also from PICAN. Thank you to our, behind the scenes team and the organizers for having us. And if you need any information, please reach out to canpacificislands@gmail.com, or you can visit us on our website on www.pican.org. And so with that, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of the day, and take care. Thank you so much. Vinaka.
Thank you, Nakalami.
Thank you, Vinakalani.
Yeah. Thank you, Ortalel.
Thank you.
Bye.